I'm going to discuss this idea of where rights come from. Where do rights come from? So one night, and this is something that came about when I was around 28 or so. So we're looking at about 12 years ago. So I'm flipping through the channels, and I flipped to C-SPAN, and I heard this Republican congressman on the House floor say that rights come from God. I didn't think that made any sense, and not because he was a Republican or a congressman. I thought that that can't be right. What I'm reciting here, I'm basically going off of what I had written about 12 years ago, or what the thoughts were 12 years ago, and there's very little modification. So I heard this congressman. I didn't think, rights come from God. That didn't sound quite right. At this time, I was, I think, agnostic to atheist. That does go into the mix. So I'm thinking, okay, this can't be right. Rights come from God. Because if rights come from God, then why were there slaves? How is it that one man can take another man's rights away if they come from God? If a man can take another man's rights away, and rights come from God, then that must mean that man is as powerful as God. Man is more powerful than God. God is uncaring. God is not all-knowing. God is not all-powerful, or there is no God. It was around the same time that I had heard something on that evil leftist NPR station. On one of the shows they had some people, and I don't remember if these individuals are historians or not, these people were talking about the Constitution. It might have been around the anniversary of some amendment or important Supreme Court case. One of the individuals mentioned how Ronald Reagan had, in his words, waxed on, the historian's words, or whomever, the guest's words, waxed on about the Constitution, whereas Thurgood Marshall's view was a bit different. And so this all got me thinking, where do rights come from? So over the next 3 weekends, and it was about 2 or 3 weekends, I spent some hours walking around in circles up in my bedroom trying to figure it out. And this, again, what I'm going to recite to you, with very little modification, is basically what I came up with. So let me take you through the basic steps of how I did this. So to figure this out, I looked at some rights, just ordinary everyday rights. Right to own property, right to free speech, right to assemble peacefully. What's common about them? So I came up with a scenario to find out and try to test things. Let's say someone is thrown in jail and their rights to speak freely, assemble, and own property are taken from them. Does that mean the prisoner can no longer do these things? Well, no. The prisoner still has the ability, the physical ability, to speak freely, possibly assemble, depending on their particular lockup situation, and they have the ability to own property, as in they could, have items in their cell. Maybe they have the physical deed to property, things like that, right? They can own a pack of cigarettes. The prisoner is just denied the opportunity to do these things at least as much as he or she had done outside of prison. So we have to test this opportunity idea. What if someone was stranded on a deserted island all by themselves? And what if this person wanted to bash in the heads of all the little critters on the island? I know it's not nice, but let's just play this thing out. What if they wanted to? The person is physically able to bash the little critters' heads in, because these little critters, they can't run away fast enough. Now, there's no human or any other thing on this island to physically stop the person from bashing in the heads of these little critters. So does that mean the person has the right to bash the little critters' heads in? Again, it's not nice, and it may not be wise, as some of those critters could be a future food supply, and some as companions. But does it mean the person doesn't have the right? Now that's a really weird scenario. It's kind of messy, so I decided to shelve that for a while and try something a little more realistic. So let's say there's a little old lady at an ATM drawing out some cash. She's all alone. ATM's in a quiet area, nobody's around. Maybe it's evening or nighttime. Some guy comes up behind her and hits her on the head and takes the money from her. He had the physical opportunity to rob her. So does that mean he had the right to rob her? Well, of course not. I mean, not in our society. And who would say yes to this? We have laws about what you can and cannot do. Okay. So if a right isn't some physical opportunity to do something, then what is it? Why doesn't the mugger have the right to mug the little old lady? So I made up another scenario to try to figure out where rights might have come from. So let's go way back when humans were still living in the Stone Age or so, back before civilization sprung up and recorded laws and the institutions we're used to and police and all of that stuff. There must have been rights way back in the day before things were written down, before we had the institutions we have today. Or how else could have societies sprung up? How else, even before there were societies, how else could just have bands of humans gotten along and therefore gotten us to where we are today if there wasn't this idea of rights at some point, somewhere? I mean, it would have just been total chaos, right? If nobody had articulated what this right thing is, nobody had come up with this. So I came up with the early humans' origins of rights hypothesis. So let's say there's a caveman, and I apologize for the horrible names I'm going to use. Well, they're not horrible, they're not really imaginative. And that there's no women, it's just all cavemen. Okay, so you've got Bob, and because that's what a caveman's name would be, Bob. And he's carved a little wooden horse. And his buddy Tom comes along and says, "Hey, that's a nice horse. Can I have it?" And Bob says, "No, it's mine." Tom says, "But I want it." And Bob says, "Well, too bad, you can't have it." So Tom takes his club and belts Bob on the head and takes the little wooden horse. So next week, Bob goes by Tom's place. And Bob says to Tom, "Hey, that's a nice wooden fish you got there. Can I have it?" Tom says, "Nope, that's mine." So Bob raises his club to crack Tom on the head, and Tom yells, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? You can't hit me in the head just because you want my fish." Bob says, "Well, why not? You did that to me last week." Tom says, "Well, that's different." Bob says, "How?" Then Jim and Earl, of course, caveman names, come rushing over after hearing all the commotion. "What's going on?" Jim asks, and Tom says, "Well, he's going to hit me in the head," pointing to Bob, "if I don't give him my fish." And Bob replies, "Well, that's what he did to me last week." And Tom says, "Oh yeah, if you hit me in the head this week and take my fish, I'm going to crack you in the head when you're sleeping and take all your stuff." And Earl chimes in, "Oh yeah, you do that and I'll crack you in the head when you're sleeping and take all your stuff." And Jim turns to Earl and says, "Then I'll do that same damn thing to you." And so for the next few minutes, these cavemen, with, I apologize, these very unimaginative names, argue amongst themselves about who's going to hit who on the head and take whose toy. So finally Tom, the jackass that started all this, calms down a bit and says, "You know what? This ain't going to work. We need some kind of arrangement or understanding. How about this? If somebody makes something, they get to keep it if they want to." "Yeah," Bob says, "and if somebody steals from them, then everybody gets to crack that guy in the head." "Works for me," says Earl. "Me too," says Jim. Tom agrees, of course. So what the hell does this have to do with where rights come from? Does this mean that rights came from caveman agreements? So let's just look at this weird-ass little scenario for a minute. The Bob and Tom idea about one's possessions became agreed upon amongst these four guys where everyone had an equal say, where everyone had equal power. Now, does that get us any closer about something about equal power? Does that get us any closer to this idea of the origins of rights? What if Tom had said, "To hell with you all," and started cracking the other three in the head until they gave in to him, and he started calling the shots? Well, then the understanding would be that Tom will crack them in the head if they don't go along with what he says. Through martial power, Tom dictates the rights of the group. Tom dictates what you can have and what you can't have. Now, we could, of course, apply this to a larger group. Say if a peaceful tribe of early humans got invaded and cracked in the head by a small group of mean SOBs that made the peaceful ones yield to them and took all their stuff. The mean SOBs, via their martial power, have made the peaceful folks submit to them and yield their opportunity to do and have what they want to do or have. Or what if there were more than four guys, say 40 people, and they took this issue to some council or the elders to decide? Then obviously those in that council or elder group get to decide what people can have and do because this group has the power. So in all these scenarios, the thread that runs through them is that those with power decide what others can do and have. And that thing you are allowed to do or have by those in power is what we call a right. Now, obviously, I didn't have to go way back to the caveman thing to see this idea that those with power decide what the rights are and who has them. Why doesn't the mugger have the right to mug the little old lady? Because those in power, the government, and or society at large, says he can't. And this government and society at large is more powerful than him. So to put it all together so far, a right is an opportunity to do or have something, and this opportunity is granted by those in power. Now, what kind of opportunity? Again, not a physical opportunity necessarily, but more a legal and or societal opportunity. So for example, in the area I live in, until I was about somewhere in my teens, a person had the right to burn garbage in a barrel on their property. Then, the law changed, and people did not have the right to burn garbage in a barrel on their property. Now, does that mean I lost the physical opportunity to burn garbage in a barrel in my front yard? No. I can still get a barrel, some garbage, and light her up. However, if those who write and enforce the law find out, I get a fine. So then that leads to the question, well, what is the law? So it appears to me that the law is the tool that those in power use to give order to the societies they govern. And the law is made of two main components, rights and rules. Rights typically tell you what you can do and or what you can have without fear of prosecution by those in power. Rules typically tell you what you cannot do and or cannot have, or you may be prosecuted by those in power. You could say that rights and rules are two sides of the same coin. What would a societal opportunity be? Maybe something like smoking weed in a state that outlaws that. A lot of people may say it's okay to smoke a joint, but the law doesn't reflect that. Another societal opportunity might be something like a bar mitzvah, where in the Jewish community a boy is seen as a man at age 13. But outside the Jewish community, the 13-year-old boy is not considered an adult until about age 18. Now, there's lots of ways you can go to try to figure out what a right is and where they come from. And there is an easier way to do this. So let me not define what a right is and still try to figure it out, and I'm going to have a little conversation with myself, as I usually do when I'm trying to figure this stuff out. So it's going to go like this. So I ask, what is a right? It's a freedom. What's a freedom? A liberty. What's a liberty? Well, it means what you can do what you want. You are free from tyranny. So what is tyranny? Tyranny is the government or some other powerful entity or person forcing you to do things you don't want to do. Can you do everything you want? No, you can't do everything you want. Why not? Well, some stuff would be stupid, and some stuff wouldn't be safe. And there's the laws. Where do the laws come from? Well, the government makes the laws, which are supposed to be based on the Constitution that our founding fathers made. So why did our founding fathers make the Constitution? So that there would be order and people would have some basic rights and protections under the law. And how did they do this? Well, they had a convention and argued and debated and amended things and voted. Before that, what happened? What? Oh, wasn't there a little Revolutionary War? Yeah. So, before the Founding Fathers could found anything, they had to not just declare their independence and state, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." They had to win, through bloodshed, the legal and or societal opportunity to do what they wanted to do. Yeah, so they had to have the power to do what they wanted to do. Yeah. So what a group of people wanted and had the power to make happen is where our rights come from. What they had the power to make happen is why we have what we have today. See how simple that was? Now, I suppose, and I did, I could have also looked in the dictionary to figure this out. Maybe. The closest from Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, the closest that I think is workable, is this: right, a noun. Something to which one has a just claim, such as A, the power or privilege to which one is justly entitled, voting rights, his right to decide; B, the interest that one has in a piece of property; often used in plural, mineral rights. Rights, plural. Did I have to write all this crap down? Property, interest possessed under law or custom, an agreement in an intangible thing, especially of a literary and artistic nature, film rights of the novel. Something that one may properly claim as due, knowing the truth is her right. The problem with those definitions is the idea of right being a claim. So what is a claim? And again from Merriam-Webster, a demand for something due or believed to be due, as in an insurance claim. A right to something, specifically a title to a debt, privilege, or other thing in the possession of another. The bank has a claim on their house. An assertion open to challenge, a claim of authenticity, advertisers' extravagant claims. So basically, and I'm sure you've heard this yourself, basically claim, right, liberty, and freedom seem to get all interchanged, and we don't actually ever really seem to clarify, really pin down and define any of these ideas without using one of the other terms in their definition. And so they just kind of go around and around and around. You know, I think it struck me at the time I began this inquiry, and again, I was about 28, that I and seemingly most people just use the word right, and again, just never really defined it, and never stopped to define it. We all just seem, and still seem, to take its meaning for granted, and or that we all have the same definition. We just use the word and never really look into it. So we've got, I think, a fairly good idea of what a right is and where they come from. So let's see if we can go back to that weird scenario with the little critters and work it out. So does that guy on a deserted island with the little critters he's thinking about bashing their heads in, does he have the right to bash their heads in if he wanted to? Well, as long as the island is not in the jurisdiction of any one nation or international body that has laws prohibiting the smashing in of little critters' heads, he does. Why? Well, because he's the society, the law, he has the power. Now, I'm not saying what he's doing is moral or humane. I'm only saying that by this nuts and bolts definition of what a right is, he can do on that island what he wants to do to those little critters. Obviously, rights and who has them, and who gives them out, this differs from society to society, and the fact remains the same. Rights are legal and or societal opportunities to do or have something, these opportunities granted by those in power. So let's also spend a few minutes discussing the belief or the beliefs that rights are God-given, natural, and or somehow innate. I've heard someone say that rights are God-given or natural or innate, and it's just that Group A did not recognize the rights of Group B, and let's say both groups are human. So this leads to the question, how did Group A not recognize the rights of Group B? Was it because Group A did not want to recognize the rights of Group B? Did they just not want to allow? Did Group A did not want to allow Group B to have or do something? Was it because Group A thought Group B was less than them? Was Group A somehow intellectually incapable of recognizing the rights of Group B? Now, looking throughout history, I think the usual answer is that Group A simply had more power of some kind, economic, martial, social, political, or some combination thereof, than Group B. And things only changed when Group B had enough power to cause Group A to reconsider its position, and or Group B became more powerful than Group A, and Group A could not dictate what Group B could do anymore. Or you could say Group B, because they became more powerful than Group A, or at least powerful enough, made it so Group A could not dictate the terms of their relationship any longer. So what makes us think that rights are God-given, natural, and or innate? Well, besides the Declaration of Independence, which really is a list of grievances, if you actually read it, and most of us don't, I think we also think that rights are God-given, or natural, or innate because we are told. We're told so. And we've been told that all our lives, And we believed it all our lives. We believe it because we want it to be so. We need it to be so. Because we want to be able to shake our fist at some SOB politician we think is screwing us over and shout at them, "Who the hell are you? You can't take my rights from me." They're God-given. It makes us feel good. We think that rights are built into being human, natural, innate. They're just there. But rights aren't golden orbs that live inside us. There is no rights gland or rights organ. When it comes to the idea that rights are natural, or there are natural rights of humans, it makes it sound like there's some golden lit thing waiting for us out in some beautiful primordial forest, or the light itself will bestow us rights if we just stand in it long enough. We may want something and justify the want of it by saying it's a right, or we may need something and justify trying to get it by saying it's a right. Say with this healthcare debate, is healthcare a right or a privilege? We may feel that as human beings, sentient, aware of ourselves, that we have certain rights. By virtue of being human, I have rights? Prove it. Where is the evidence? And again, what is your definition of rights? When I hear people use the term rights, it almost sounds as though they're talking about something you can hold in your hand, but you can't. It's like justice. You can't hold justice in your hand. However, based on the idea of justice, we can see acts and classify certain acts as just or unjust, even though there is no thing, no physical, tangible thing called justice. So if rights are not God-given, natural, and or innate, then what? Now there is a practical application to all of this. If rights are not God-given and or natural, innate, as many people want them, need them, believe them to be, what does that mean? It means, as human history shows, those in power can take your rights away or water them down to the point of uselessness because a right, 1, is a legal and or societal opportunity to do or have something, this opportunity granted by those in power. 2, a right is an opportunity to do or have something without fear of prosecution by those in power. What this all means, keeping the history of slavery, revolutions, and civil rights movements in mind, is that we, especially those of us living in democratic societies, must always keep an eye on those in power because it is far easier for rights to be taken away than given. We can believe whatever we want to believe about rights. Unfortunately, belief, or need, or want, does not guarantee that your rights will not be infringed upon or taken from you. There does not seem to be a direct proportion between one's beliefs that they have rights and if they actually do. The only thing that makes rights real is power, and again, this is why we must always keep an eye on those with power. Now maybe after all of this you still think that rights are God-given and or natural or innate. Okay? So let me ask you this. Do you think you have a God-given and or natural right to any of the following? Buy a 6-pack of beer from a grocery store on Sunday. Own a fully operational, fully armed Black Hawk helicopter. Drive 22.5 miles through a school zone Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Drive 56 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour speed zone. Paint your house whatever color you want. Buy cigarettes when you're 17. Sell one of your kidneys or other internal organs. If you live in the suburbs or city, keep a cow in your backyard. Have a beer at the pizza place when you're 18. Store nuclear waste in your backyard. Turn your basement into a casino for the public. Kick someone out of your store, place of business because they have green eyes. If you're a woman, wear pants. Wear your hair, if you have any way you like. See, rights aren't just the big ones. It's these ordinary, everyday ones as well. Do you have a God-given or natural or innate right to any of these? Thank you for your time.